Okay, there we go, folks. This is Leslie Nips, your guide and facilitator today for a little Intro to Constellations festival. This is a very interesting kind of a thing. As soon as you do something free, all kinds of people show up, and we have people who like, what are constellations? I don't know. Aren't those things in the sky? To people here who could actually do their own Intro to Constellations workshop. Yeah. So we have a broad range of people here and a broad range of exposures. Some of you are going to find what I do like, come on, I know this. And others, it may be a little fire hosey and a little bit more or faster than you can take. You're going to get the recording, so you can have that available. And for those of you who really do know your constellations, I just gently remind you that this is an Intro to Constellations experience. Yeah. But hopefully you get something pretty cool out of it, because sometimes it's good. I remember that time I was doing my horseback riding, my trainer, I've been doing all kinds of exciting things, and she spent 60 minutes having me walk the horse, like really going back to kindergarten. So there's some use for this, right? Because just going back to some basics can be super useful. A little orientation, as we usually do. I have you all on muting. Typical Zoom etiquette to please stay on mute unless you're speaking. The chat, we don't use it much. I ask you to not sort of bomb me with chats while I'm lecturing. If you have a quick question, that's fine. But a whole bunch, like I am an easily distractible human being, I admit it. And I do want to see and hear your questions. Most of the time, you're just going to be able to raise your hand or raise your digital hand. Yeah, and then I'll get to you in a moment when I can. Screen views, upper right-hand corner. For the moment, I'm actually going to, as a reminder to myself, I'm going to spotlight myself for the purposes of the recording. Mostly when I'm talking, that's probably useful for you. And then, of course, the reminder, it is being recorded. So if you ask questions, you share something personal, please remember to that you're being recorded. Yeah, make sure you only share what you're comfortable having seen later. Don't worry, when we get to the small breakouts, none of that'll be recorded. Okay. So please take a moment. This is a moment I deliberately invite you to use the chat. Use the chat and put in your name and where you're zooming in from. We had the United States, Canada, and a bunch of Europe and even Israel this morning. I already see some folks from the other side of the planet because for them it's tomorrow, which is there today, which I love. So let's just get a sense of where around the world we are. We've got some Americans, but we do have someone from Australia. Good. Some of you know each other. That's great. I'm not going to read everybody's post, but please read each other's, so you get a sense for where on the planet we're reaching out to each other from. Okay. We're gathering to do something together. This is not the most gritty, vulnerable thing you will do all month. Hopefully, I mean, that's really not the goal of this. But you know, there could be some vulnerability and some tenderness. People did some of the exercises this morning, and you know, the field just shows up something wonderful and useful and unexpected. Yeah, that may or may not happen for you. That's fine. But we've decided to do that together. Little workshop outline, a bit of lecture up front, and then we're going to do some small group practice. No breaks, so if you need a break, take care of that for yourself. Okay. A little bit of a group agreement. So remember, tech can be glitchy. It happens. Let's all be patient if that happens with each other. And if you're having something on your side, please understand we can't stop and troubleshoot that for you, right? If you are experienced in constellations, but I am new to you, I know that's true for a couple of you. The nice thing about constellations is that there's a common foundation and practice that you will recognize. The other nice thing is that since it was developed, there's been a lot of adaptations and evolution in the work. That means that what I do may or may not look familiar to you if you've never seen me work before. I hope you find that exciting and fun. But if for whatever reason it's not your cup of tea, that's totally fine. I just really ask you to let me captain the ship for the sake of, what we're up to here for a couple of hours. Yeah. It's my plan, in addition to some good learning, this is mostly a learning workshop, that you may have a meaningful personal experience. Given, again, the limitations of what we're up to here, though, there's a pretty good chance it'll be partial. Like a door may be opened, but the movement may not be completed. Just let that be okay for yourself. Take care of yourself. Don't dive in more than this particular platform can really accommodate. Yeah. That's a big part of caring for oneself. Yeah. Confidentiality, that's super important, right? Some of you may know each other, but even if you don't, it's sort of a respectful thing if you're sharing about this later, which is just fine. Feel free to share with people your experience, but leave out all the personal details. Yeah. Again, this is not going to be the deepest, most vulnerable experience you've had in your life, hopefully. But there could be some personal details that you get along the way, and ask you to not share those. Is everyone okay with that? Raise your hand if those very modest boundaries are good for us. Great, thank you. Okay, so that's enough of the boilerplate. Let's shift gears and become present for this, yeah? It's always good to center ourselves when we start to look at healing modalities of any kind. Don't know what kind of a day you're having. You may be really scattered, or you may be just starting out. Whatever it is, just come home to yourself in the ways that you know how to do that. I like to close my eyes for a sec. Take a few conscious breaths. Notice my body in the chair. Notice how I'm feeling just kind of generally. There's room for whatever I'm feeling, whatever you're feeling. Don't have to change it. Maybe notice your heart, your breath. And then in Constellations work, for those of you who are new to this, and this may be new, we notice what generations of humans have noticed for a very long time, but which some of our subcultures have forgotten, which is that we're always in the presence of our forebears. That the beloved dead are not entirely dead to us. That the ancestors are present. And so I invite you to take a moment to just notice that in any way that you're inclined to notice it. Some of you may feel the ancestors somewhere physically around you, in the space around you. Or you may get an image in your mind's eye, or something else. That's fine. However you notice the ancestors, just take a moment to notice that. And if this is a brand new thought to you, then just sort of give it a try. My forebears are here. Always, always present to us and influencing us. And for some of you, this may be very familiar territory. So just go ahead and do it again, because we're not always conscious of it. So let's just make it conscious. And then as you're noticing the ancestors, in whatever way that you do that, I'm going to invite you to say a few sentences to them. You can say them out loud or in your mind's eye. These may be familiar words. These may be brand new words. It may feel comfortable to say them. It may feel not quite right to say them, feel free to change them if you like. I invite you to say to them, dear ancestors, I honor the dignity of your fate. I have a place in my heart for it, and I leave it with you. Thank you for my life. Please bless me as I walk my path until I join you. But not for a while. Again, change any words that you want to, that's just fine. Just notice what it's like. For some of you, that may feel familiar and comfy, and for others, it may be a little less comfortable. Whatever your experience it is, it belongs. Just notice what it's like to you to start to address your ancestors this way. And after you say, please bless me as I choose my path, hear them say, perhaps, of course. Feel their desire to bless you. And as you notice all that, come on back. Whatever your experience was. And we'd like to hear from a couple of you. So whether you had a beautiful experience or a tricky one, or it raised a question for you, it's always good to hear briefly from one or two or three people. What did you notice? You can either, I can see you all right now, so you can actually raise your physical hand. Every once in a while, I may ask you to raise your digital hand instead. But a couple of shares. Cheryl.
Well, what came to me was to say, please help me to learn from your experiences and correct what you would have corrected. So please help me help us. Yeah. Feel the collectivity of all of us in humanity, because I think this is quite an assignment that we have been given to be given to be a human being.
Yeah. And you might hear them say back to you something like, we would be honored if you could make choices we could not make.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Hear them saying they would like it for us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. 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 Lovely. This is one way into the possibility for some of us when we have ancestors who did some not so great things, right? Yeah. To begin to be in relationship with them. Yeah. Thank you, Cheryl. Somebody else. Yeah, Susie.
So I found it interesting. That was the easiest one I've had to bring my mum and dad easily in, and then their parents behind them. And I was just focusing on them. And next thing, it was like this light came through, and all the rest, there was a whole bunch of others. And I could sort of tell which sides of the family they were from. Some of them I've never met. But it was interesting. They were all coming and all sort of bringing love. Yeah.
Nice. Lovely. I'm glad you had that, Susie. And what you're saying sort of, Susie's, this is not her first rodeo. She's been around Constellations for a while. It is not uncommon if you're brand new to constellations for it to not feel so great to include mom and dad up front, given our personal histories with our moms and dads. And what we often find is, having done the work over a few months or a few years, something about that starts to shift in a way that we're able to welcome. So I just wanted to unpack that just a little bit. Wherever you're at in that journey, it's just fine. It's just fine. Yeah. Sometimes we have to like start from the back of the ancestors and then come closer. That's not a bad thing to do sometimes. Yeah. After all, we actually, we have actual memories of our mothers and fathers most of the time. Yeah. It's trickier territory. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. And thank you to all of you for doing that. I really appreciate it. What I want to do now is I'm going to talk for a little bit, hopefully not too long, but this is where I want to offer up some of the introductory material. I'm going to go and spotlight myself again. Yeah. There we go. Okay. And I want to start out with a couple of some stories. Because I think actually, I mean, I'm a nerd. I like to nerd out on this theory and stuff. I have a lot of fun doing that. And I think it's very, I don't want to dismiss it. It can be very heartfelt. And I hope to make the foundational material heartfelt. And like most things, it's kind of useful to come through stories, right? What is this experience actually like somewhat? And we can't capture all of that, but I want to invite you into a couple of client stories. How the systemic perspective, which is what Constellations gives us a practical body-based introduction to see the whole system and how it's affected us, and how the whole system is often what's invisibly running the show behind our very personally felt symptoms and experiences, yeah? But which, when we try to explain them or work with them as personal things, my depression, my eating disorder, my relationship issues, yeah, we only get so far. Yeah, we only get so far, okay? So these are some stories that sort of start to break open what the systemic perspective does for real people. So I had a client who had a compulsive overeating issue. She couldn't stop eating. We could have a conversation right off the bat around all the psychodynamic interpretations around food and eating, right? We do it to protect ourselves or to get nurture, or, all the explanations, and they are not bad in and of themselves. They are just incomplete, okay? And so she had tried all the things, it wasn't working. And when I talked with a bit of an interview with her, I discovered that her grandparents barely survived the siege of Leningrad in World War II. For those of you who know European history of that period, it is one of the great sort of famine events of the 20th century. People were reduced to eating shoe leather kind of thing, and her grandparents barely survived it, yeah? We have to imagine they spent long periods of time desperately hungry, yeah? And what we discovered is my client, out of love and belonging to them and honoring their experience unconsciously, yeah, had their hunger. It was a way to honor them and be bound to them. And once we found a different way to honor them, which is what we did in our opening, a little meditation, sort of in a more superficial way or a more generic way, once we honored them and what happened to them, and that was well worth honoring, spending a little bit of time of saying, grandparents, I see you're suffering. Yeah. There is very frequently people experience this automatic relief. Because we're now including these very important ancestral experiences in a more conscious and more honorable fashion. And now we don't need to include it in the unconscious fashion, yeah? Or what Constellations calls entanglement. Yeah. So that's one story. Another one, this isn't so much about the entanglement per se, but sort of the tenderness of what parents want to protect their children from and how loving and unuseful it can be. Okay. So I had a very young Chinese American client who I was doing the interview with her, and she said something about her mother when she was a teenager got to go live on a farm. And I did the math in my head and I'm like, ooh, that's the 70s. That sounds like the Cultural Revolution to me. And I said, by any chance was your mother sent to a re-education farm? And she said, no, a farm, happy. And I said, go talk to your mother. Go ask her respectfully. And she came back to me and she said, I had no idea. She didn't even know about the Cultural Revolution, which had so impacted her parents' generation, right? And out of love, her parents had tried to protect her from all that history. Yeah, we understand. Yeah. And it's much better to be a daughter and to be able to say, Mother, I honor the suffering you went through. I'm so glad you survived it. Thank you for my life. Yeah. Thank you for bringing me to a place where I'm unlikely to have to go through what you went through. Yeah. Okay, another one. This is one that's not a specific client. This is lots of clients, and it's going to represent many of you here, having an uncle or a cousin or a grandfather, usually a man, not always, but usually, who was a vet. And we know the story, Joe, he went off to the Korean War, or, whoever it is, yeah. We get told these stories without any of the energy, the energy content of it, in a sense. We just sort of trip over it. And I make people slow down, right? And then if we do a constellation on Uncle Joe or whoever it is, we often find out that this was the defining experience of their adulthood, and it shaped everyone around them, even though it was never talked about. We're now in elephant in the room territory, right? Yeah. And it is high time for us to turn to whoever it is, yeah, and say, dear uncle, I honor your service, and I see what it cost you. And I frequently at this point, because at this point, a half hour in, the clients are crying about this. And when a client is crying, you're onto something real. People don't, do pretend crying, right? This is a real somatic encounter with something very sad but beautiful and really important, right? And they turn to me and they say, I had no idea. Like, yeah, that's what we do with our vets in most cultures. Yeah, we tell them to not talk about it and act like nothing ever happened when everything happened. And it impacts their spouses and their children and their work and maybe their addictions. Yeah, it affects everything. Yeah. And there's a relief to finally going, oh, I need to honor this. Yeah. In the United States, we have Memorial Day or Veterans Day. Very few people actually go to commemorations. In your countries, you may have different, memorializing days. I often tell clients, find the local war memorial, go to the Memorial Day parade, honor these people. This is not the same as approving of war, right? It has nothing to do with that. Most of us, I think, disapprove of war here. Yeah. But to have a place in our hearts for these people and what they endured and what we as a culture ask them to do on our behalf, even when we're wrong about what we ask them to do, right? So that's kind of a large thing. And then one more, a client, many of you might identify with this, who had a mother who kind of parentified her. She kind of had to take care of her mom. Yeah, I'm sure we have a few people here, mother or father, who kind of enrolled you in parenting them in a sense. And this tends to, as we age, make us pretty grumpy, right? To the point where actually we may have some rage about it. And if our parent keeps doing it as we are older, we may not even be able to be around them because our parent isn't being a parent around us, and it makes us nuts. Makes us pretty nuts, yeah? Yeah. So in this one, and there are all kinds of things that can drive this pattern, but in this particular instance, it was, we discovered in the constellation that the mother, her mother lost a child really tragically right before, yeah? It was such a tragic and traumatizing impact on the family that when my client's mother came into the world, her mother basically said in her own mind, not consciously, she didn't do this consciously, right? But I will not bond with my daughter because I'm too afraid of losing her. I can't go through that again. And so the client's mother was reaching for mother in various places, and she reached to her own daughter for it. Now, here we have an intervention, right? If we can honor grandmother's loss and give a place to the lost child, yeah, we may see the representative for the grandmother finally see the client's mother and go, oh my gosh, you are my daughter, I love you. I see how this impacted you. And when we have a reunion between the grandmother and the mother, then maybe the mother can turn to the client and say, oh my gosh, I see you're my daughter, you're not my mother. Yeah. And then, you know, if things are going well, there's a real, like, just at the somatic level, something shifts, something changes. Yeah. And if something doesn't change, we keep looking, and we keep looking. So stories, these are the things that happen in constellations, and this is the framework that we work with. Why do I love constellations? Why do I do this work? Why is it the thing that I pay the bills with? Because I'm a systemics geek. Yeah. I really like seeing the bigger picture. And I feel like so much of the things in our culture are really stuck because we see them as interpersonal, right? As about me and my insides, or if I'm in a conflict with someone, it's my fault or your fault, right? We try and figure out, is it his fault or is it my fault? Yeah. But what if we're in a system that requires us to be in conflict? Yeah. Yeah. Then our intervention cannot be just to get people to communicate better, right? As useful as communicating better is in the world, and I highly recommend it, right? But this is why often those kinds of interventions amongst couples don't work very well, because the conflict's being held somewhere else in the system. Yeah. And I love this. I want to honor that we have our founder, Bert Hellinger. He sort of developed this work in the 70s and 80s in Europe. The context was mostly post-war reconciliation between Jews and Christians, so extremely fraught and difficult environment. Even working with clients whose fathers have been SS officers, I mean, just really difficult systemic environments. He, of course, has an enormous set of influences from the Zulus in South Africa to a wide variety. I mean, the 70s was the time for all that burgeoning of humanistic psychologies, all of which was very influential. If you want to find out more about his roots in South Africa and what he learned there, I invite you to go to something called African Constellations. They've done some really beautiful research and have really recovered that history quite beautifully. Doing constellations, I'm going to say something outrageous. The method is easy. It's easy. You set up mom, you set up dad, you say, what are you experiencing? And they tell you what they're experiencing, and it's not hard. Yeah. The method itself, you can look at any system, a business, your chakras, your internal parts, a family, which is the main application. Yeah. That part is pretty easy. What is a bit more challenging is learning the foundational principles, because as I've already implied, systemic thinking is so different from the way we've been trained to think about ourselves and about the world and about each other. Yeah. The psychodynamic way of thinking about the world is perfectly legitimate and very useful, kind of thing where we say, I have poor self-esteem because my father criticized me. Very useful frame, but it has its limitations. What Constellations does is says, what the heck happened to dad? Yeah. That he thinks criticizing me is the best way to keep me safe and well. Now, everything might change. It might. Yeah. Because we're now in the place where the problem is actually held. Yeah. If you're too hot in your apartment or home right now, I could tell you think cool thoughts, or I can tell you to change the thermostat, change the system, work at the level of the system. That is what we're doing. That does take longer to start thinking differently. I can't tell you how often the early days of watching trainings and watching students try and do psychotherapy, family psychotherapy with the representatives, right? It doesn't work very well. We're trying to look at something else. Yeah. So the thing that really leads us to mastery is doing it a lot. Yeah, doing it messily, doing it under the rubric of the foundational principles, and learning how this thing works. Yeah. I do want to share some basic concepts here, okay? I'm going to run through these a little bit. For those of you who are brand new to them, I'm going to pre-apologize. You may end up going, I don't know what she just said about any of this. But I'm going to invite you to just catch what you catch. And again, I'm going to send out the recording, okay? So the first thing I want to share is the orders of love, or as someone else has put it more nerdishly, the self-organizing principles of groups and systems, right? Every group or system will organize itself in some way, right? And families, this is mostly about families today, have their own principles, and they really guide us in the work. They're, in a sense, a diagnostic system to say, what order of love is out of order here that's causing the suffering that we can see? Yeah. So the first one is honoring what is. Yeah. That goes back to the elephant in the room thing, or the mother who wanted to protect her daughter from the truth about the Cultural Revolution. Yeah. Very loving, but it doesn't honor what is. Yeah. And a lot of family suffering comes from people well-meaningly refraining from, dealing with secrets, yeah, and it just causes havoc. Yeah? So honoring what is the first one. The second one is belonging, particularly in families. Whoever belongs has a place. You can't get adopted out. You can't die out. You can't go to Morocco and reject your family. You can't be worked out of the will out. You can't be thrown out at 14. You always belong to the people who gave you life. Now, of course, in ordinary life, people get excluded and thrown out all the time, right? We know that. We understand that. And so, like the not honoring what is, when we don't acknowledge the belonging of people who do belong, it's got consequences. There's consequences. System is going to adjust around that. Yeah. The family that didn't have a way to properly honor the starvation event in Leningrad, yeah. How did she re-include that thing that had not been honored and given a place? She included it in herself. Yeah. That's not the right way for it to be included, right? That's not good for her. And it doesn't do anything to help Leningrad back in 1940, right? Yeah. So the better way to honor, include it, and give these things a place is to say, grandparents, I see your suffering. I have a place in my heart for it. Yeah? And then something shifts. Yeah? Belonging in conscience. Oh, sorry, back to orders of love, seniority. This is mostly about the direction of the flow of life. So life flows from the ancestors to us, not the other way around. As in the case of the daughter who is parentified by the mother, we often find ourselves in the position of being in roles that are not ours for all kinds of reasons. Yeah. And it messes up systems when we do this, consciously or unconsciously. Yeah. The daughter of the mother needs to be the daughter of the mother. Yeah. Life flows this way, not that way. So much more I could say about that. But people get tangled up all the time in each other's experiences. So those are the basic orders of love. There are other ones, but those are the main ones. And when someone comes to us who has the blues in their lives about something, we're wondering, okay, what's out of order? Is there a lack of belonging? Is there someone in a wrong role? Is there something that hasn't been honored and given a place? And then a constellation seeks to finally make that happen. I often call constellations the overdue funeral, the long overdue funeral. Okay, our next concept is belonging and conscience. This is kind of a gnarly topic, but I will just say this old saying: the child of thieves who steals does not feel guilty. Belonging is an astonishingly strong driver. We have to belong. Yeah? And think about the guy who goes out on the battlefield knowing he's going to die. It's a belonging driver. Yeah? So I will do it right up to death. Yeah? And so we're very curious about the unconscious belongings that are running some of the shows in our lives. Yeah? And then we want to find a better way to belong than taking on their suffering or their symptoms. Entanglement, I've already mentioned. It follows immediately. The client with the Leningrad grandparents was entangled, right? Out of belonging, we take on the symptoms of, or the meanings, the experiences, yeah, of events that happened that we don't even know about, because the emotions and the meanings endure in the system anyway. It's a grief-soaked system. It's a terrified system. It's a guilty system. Yeah. And we pick it up, we acquire it. Yeah? That's entanglement. And the question becomes again, is there a better way to belong? So that we can do what I invited us in the meditation, which is to walk our path. Not the path of those who've gone before. The knowing field, yeah. Always trouble when you want to define a big, massive metaphysical concept like this, yeah. But the knowing field is what makes constellations work or possible. Mostly we don't know how that works. What I can say, like you did in the meditation, if you bring to mind or you set up representatives to represent elements of a system, as Jane Peterson puts it, if you outpicture the system by setting something up, yeah, you will notice and feel the emotions and meanings and even the stories of that system. Yeah. So if you think about someone right now in your family who had a really difficult fate, yeah, and you have a place in your heart for them, you're going to start feeling sad. Isn't that crazy? They're not even here, right? Yeah. It's a little mini constellation. Yeah. So we set up elements of a system and we experience the system in broad outlines. Yeah. Always warn, constellations is not historical research, but we can feel the system's grief or terror or guilt, whatever it is. And then we can work with it. Say, dear grandmother, we honor the 3 children who died in the influenza epidemic. Yeah. Dear great-grandfather, we honor that your dignity was not respected as a closeted gay man. and give a place to these things. And then something shifts. And then the last one flows immediately from the knowing field, representational perception. It is just the reliable experience of someone steps into a role and the knowing field informs them about what is most relevant, useful, and important to our question today. Yeah. Yeah. So we feel mother's rage, or we feel father's confusion, or whatever it might be. Yeah. And then we can engage with those meanings and honoring the orders of love, give a place to the things that have not been given a place and need to be given a place. Yeah. So those are some of the basic concepts. I want to say a few words about my approach to teaching, my pedagogy. There are a lot of trainings out there. There are piles and piles and piles of them, mostly online these days. That's something that the pandemic has permanently changed. It's just too convenient for all of us to not have to buy airline tickets to get trained to be a family constellator. There's some losses there. That's why if you want to learn this, I always encourage you to get as much local embodied exposure to the work as you possibly can. But my main sort of touchstones for the work is, as I've already implied, to learn the foundational principles until they become muscle memory, right? So that the orders of love and relating to belonging and conscience and noticing entanglements and all these things just becomes part of, you step into a constellation, it's just all kind of there waiting for you. Yeah. Practice from the beginning. This is different from some facilitators, trainers who want you to watch lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of constellations and get a lot of constellations before you ever facilitate. Obviously, in the beginning, you should do little things that are in scale to where you're at, right? We don't throw you in the deep end, hopefully. But it's my feeling that the best way to learn, the most holistic way to learn, is to be learning the theory and doing the somatic practice at the same time. I have found that a lot of people who do all of the learning up front and then they're presented with the possibility of facilitating, they are a bit terrified. Often because they've seen so much good facilitating and they can't imagine ever doing that. We need to let people be messy. Just like if you want to learn skiing, you got to go on the bunny hill and fall down. And you go, oh, that's how I work my center of gravity. Yeah. I'm a big believer in the cohort model. This is also what makes my training a little bit different. Not so different from the old days when everything was in person, but now that everything's online, it can be more convenient for everybody to do a more module-based training where you do, a few hours of this and then a few hours of that, and then you cobble it together, and at the end you get certified. But mostly that means you're not doing it as part of a learning community. Yeah. So my way of doing it is to have a cohort. We're together from October to February. We get to know each other too well. Part of the downside, but it's a good side, right? And we watch each other be messy and we give each other a lot of grace and room. And there's something about being a learning community together. Yeah. And some people take to some parts more easily and some people take to other parts more easily. And there's some group learning. And for me, I'm convinced it's a really important way of integrating it, really integrating it. Yeah. So that's my model. And it's an adult learning course. This should be presupposed, but it's worth saying. This is why I don't do trainings with hundreds of people in it. Back to the cohort learning model. My group is 12 to 20 at the most, because it's a group learning process and we're here to learn constellations, not do therapy. Although everybody who's in my trainings gets growth from it because we're all doing constellations with each other, right? But the people who join my trainings need to have a certain amount of capacity for self-care. And when things kick up and things are awkward or off, like ways of taking care of themselves so that they don't just fall apart. and we can stay in the group process together. Yeah. For some people, they're in a place in their healing journey and working with their trauma where if we kick stuff up, that's going to be too hard. They're not going to be able to do that. And I totally respect and honor that, but maybe it's not the right time for being in a constellation training. Yeah, wait a few years and then do that when it's the right time. So this is an adult learning course. We want to learn how to be facilitators. The last thing I want to say before we go back to some questions and then some practice is Constellations is a job. If you are or you're considering having this pay the bills someday, right? I want to say a few things about that. That is my situation. Constellations is what I do for a living, and it's a perfectly fine living. Some people, just sort of have it on the side as part of what they have to pay the bills. Some people integrate it with already established healing practices like coaching or therapy or astrology or other things that they do, which is great. They're sort of building their toolkit. And other people actually, I'm retired, I just want to give this away for free. Totally fine, right? Totally fine. But if you're thinking about wanting this to become your work, and you don't already have a business, you're not self-employed yet, I just really want you to understand you're going to have to learn something about building a business too, which is it's a whole other skill. Unless you plan to be hired by somebody to be a constellation facilitator, and if you know about that job, let me know. I don't think those jobs, there are a lot of those out there yet, but you're going to want. It's its own journey building a business, and it doesn't happen like that. Yeah. That's why I include a business building module as part of my trainings for anyone who wants it. There's some special things about us heart-based business people who are in business that make ordinary frames around business not our favorite thing in the world. And I actually really enjoy clearing that all up for people so that they can really enjoy building an ethical business that supports them and is part of what I like to call the sacred marketplace. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. Another thing to really keep in mind, my friends, and this is no fooling around, constellations facilitating is vulnerable emotional work. For those of you who are psychotherapists out there, you already know what I'm talking about. Yeah? You're welcoming people who have trauma into your life on a regular basis. Yeah. And emotional labor is a real thing. And so being in a certain place in your own healing journey where you can sort of wrestle with that a bit, and have your support systems and self-care and boundaries and all the things, right? And understand that sometimes clients and students are going to show up with their wounds, and that will not be fun. Yeah. Yeah. So I really want to honor for anyone who's, if you've been in other healing modalities, you know what I'm talking about here. Yeah. It comes with the territory. Having said that, the reason why I'm in it again is because from my point of view, this is just often the systemic perspective that people have been missing and really needing. And when they do it, something changes. Something that matters changes. And then finally, of course, like all work where we're dealing with people who are paying us money and who are vulnerable and are carrying wounds, is we need to have our own structures of professional and ethical practice. Right? Standards we hold ourselves to, and which we hold ourselves accountable to as we do the work. This is all part of the training, okay? And maybe part of what you bring to the table as you're considering leading constellations as well. Okay. So that's all the talk. I want to invite if there are any questions about anything that you've heard before we move into a little bit of practice with each other. Yeah, I see a hand. I think that's Kathy.
Yes. I'm wondering at the end, I don't want to be too specific, but with the business portion, I have a thriving business for like 15 years, but I did sign up for the business part because I wanted to, I have places in my business that as I'm going to be adding this, that I would like help from. Is this an appropriate time to sign up for that training or?
I'm sorry, for which training?
For the business portion, I signed up for the business training.
Right. So that's done along with the regular training. And yes, it is a good time. The people who sign up for the business module in the Constellation training have a wide variety of positions they're at with respect to business. Some are brand new. Many of them actually have something going, but they need some help with it for whatever reason. And we work with people where they're at. And it's actually kind of nice. People at different levels, there's still something very supportive about coming together. And we do lots of constellations on business, and it's very cool. What I heard there, I'm like, we probably need to do a constellation on that. Right? Right? Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I really recommend doing it at the same time because it's the most holistic way to learn. Yeah. And then we learn that being heart-based and doing our healing work is not contradictory with building a business. Yeah. Which our culture would like to teach us that, right? How many people have the artist thing, you know, it's not ethical for me to make money as an artist or as a healer, right? Balderdash, but it is a common enough pattern. It needs to be wrestled with a little bit. Yeah. And it's there for some understandable reasons. Other questions or comments on what I've shared over the last few minutes? I just noticed, by the way, we are abounding in Leslies. We have a whole lot of Leslies in the group here today. Yeah. Question or comment about what you heard? Again, for you people who are really new to constellations, you may be going, wow. Yeah, Leslie W.
I just want to say that was the most enjoyable, best comprehensive overview of constellation work I've ever heard. I really, really enjoyed it.
Well, good. Yeah. Takes a lot of self-control not to go down any of those paths that I start. I don't think I had as much self-control in the first workshop, so you all are getting the advantage of me working through this one time. Suzanne, I see your hand up.
Okay. So I'm not in the training and I'm just interested in constellations. I attended sessions when you were here in Oakland, and I kind of want to do some self constellations. You know, I'm just here today because part of what you said in this was anyone interested in constellations, you know.
Totally, just fine. We're glad you're here.
Okay.
Probably 75% of the people here are not contemplating the training. So I just
okay.
You belong, Suzanne.
Okay, I would hopefully maybe all the concepts you ran through, you know, in the talk, they're very new to me, but I can intuit them. So if there's resources or other ways of learning, you know, books, videos.
Yes. We're at a stage in the constellations, the development of this field, that there are a gabillion books now. There are a whole lot of books out there now. I believe you when you say you've got a good intuitive sense of stuff and doing constellations by yourself. I will just give 2 heads up. One is that some of these foundational principles are not intuitive, and they do kind of need to be learned a little bit on manual. And in fact, intuition aside, some of them are unconventional enough, not the way we've been taught about the good way to be in the world, that it can take a little getting used to. So having some way to be exposed to the foundational principles is really useful. And then the second thing I'll just say about constellating for yourself, I do it all the time. I love constellating for myself. I write things on pieces of paper and I put them on the ground and I stand on them and I find out, what I ought to do. Constellating for yourself usually works for low stakes issues. Yeah. Once we get to high stakes issues, like fixing my conflict with my brother, things were like, we're at a different level than, what credit union should I sign up for? Which is literally something I did a constellation on once. Okay. You can do the constellation through, there's sort of two halves to a constellation, give or take. There's the what's going on in the system half. What invisible forces are at work? And then the second half is making adjustments or invitations. Yeah. You can do the first half by yourself, no problem, and learn a lot about what's going on. If me and my conflict with my brother, find out, oh, my mother's involved in this. I didn't even realize that. Or, oh, my brother's carrying some weight I don't even know about. What the heck is that, right? You can get those insights. When it comes to making interventions or changes, my personal experience with doing constellations for yourself is that my unconscious agenda is going to start to run the show. And I need an internal facilitator to help me do genuine resolutions. Yeah. When the stakes are high. Yeah. There's some part of me that wants my brother to be wrong. Right? Yeah, that kind of thing. And that's not going to work, right? That kind of perspective is not going to work to come to a real resolution. So yes, do these on your own. I will give you a couple of books. Anything by Bertold Ulsimer. This is one. He's pretty good at writing books that have all the basics in there. So I can recommend anything by him. The other one I recommend to everyone here, it will not give you the basics. That's not how Bert Hellinger writes. For a systems thinker, he's not very systematic, right? However, what this beautiful book does is it throws you into case studies over and over and over and over and over again. And my experience is that people who really want to be students of this work is that this is a transmission. If you really read it, yeah. And I don't mean read it like you would a novel, right? I mean, do a section, do a section, do a section. Love's Hidden Symmetry by Bert Hellinger. I really, I require my students to read this book, okay? It will not give you a list of the orders of love. That's what's missing from this book. It doesn't have that, but it really does communicate something. If you want the foundational principle, something like anything by Bertold Ulsimer is pretty good. I also say one other thing, just because some of you will go to Amazon after this, and you will notice that Love's Hidden Symmetry is like $150 there. I'm just giving you a website. Sorry for those of you who live internationally, this is not a great resource for you. Although I assume you can order from them if you're willing to pay the shipping costs. But they have an excellent library of basic constellation books by Francesca Mason-Boring, by Ursula Franke, by Stefan Hausner. Anything you decide you want to buy from there is going to be basic. Okay, it's going to be something you're going to be happy you have on your bookshelf. Okay. So thank you for that. And you might consider training anyway at some point. Yeah.
Who knows? But I'm just curious now. I've become more curious, and I did get this book, Judy Wilkins Smith, Decoding Your Emotional Blueprint.
Yeah. That's the thing, is that there's now a gabillion books out there. I've heard of that. I've not read it.
Yeah. So thanks for the recommendations. Did you mention there was a website? I didn't catch.
I put it into the chat.
Oh, great. Okay. Thank you.
The other one that a lot of people read that's basic is Mark Wolyn's It Didn't Start With You. But again, it's not going to give you the list of the orders of love. It's an introduction to the concept, really, and it's practical. It's for a popular audience, right? Yeah. But that's another one that a lot of people go to. Okay. So what I want to do now, I want to make sure we have enough time for this because I shortchanged it a little bit this morning, is that I want us to do a little bit of practice with each other. Now, I did promise in the description of this that I would give you little facilitatory things to do, okay? This is a little bit of an untruth because I can't put someone in someone else's hands and not having given you some more robust tools for facilitating. However, there are many constellation formats that I'm going to invite you to do. You don't have to. This is completely voluntary. I hope you do. They are fun. But when you do these mini constellation formats, there is a sense in which you are bringing some facilitator muscles. Yeah? Because there is no formal facilitator in these little group formats. I'm going to put you into pairs, again, if that's what you want to do, to explore a little dyad system that's very important to us. Okay, we're going to have a couple of chances to do this, a couple of different systems. And the main thing that I really invite you to do, we are so quick to interpret, okay? So quick to get some information and then put it in some categories. I invite you, this is your first sort of working the facilitator muscle, is to just take the information as information and not try to interpret it. Yeah? And I will demonstrate this a little bit. You're also, part of it is going to be put aside a little bit of your story about whatever we're going to be looking at and just allow, this is the thing that we do with the knowing field. It brings information to us that we're not expecting. My angry dad is actually grief-stricken underneath that. Who knew, right? Yeah, discovering these things underneath that actually change our way of looking at the system in very profound ways, okay? So to do that, we have to put aside the official story just a little bit. So what I would like to do right now is, Jacqueline, would you be willing to demo something with me? Nope, she's frozen. I can't do it with Jacqueline. Never mind Jacqueline. Kathy, would you be willing to demonstrate something with me for just a moment?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. And you're freezing just a tiny bit too. I wonder if I'm the common thing right here, but we will work with it. So Kathy, you go ahead and stand. Okay. So if you decide you want to do this, my friends, you'll be put in a Zoom room with another human being. Yeah. And you're going to get 10 minutes to do these. So it's 5 minutes each. They're very brief, but you can get a lot out of it. Yeah. And you start out with this other human being and start out by being friendly and say, hi, I'm Leslie.
Hi.
Yeah. But move pretty quickly into the constellation, which is choosing who's going to go first. Okay. And in this instance, we're going to decide that I am going to go first. Okay. And we're going to look at an extremely simple but very beautiful system. Some of you have done this with me before already, but you'll get a different experience of it today, which is to look at the system of you and your heart. Okay. So I'm going to be myself, a little bit of ritual. I'm going to turn to Kathy and say, Kathy, would you represent my heart?
Yes.
She's willing to do that. And then you don't have to close your eyes and squinch. You don't have to work hard. You're just going to start noticing your experience. And when you notice something that seems worth saying, you share it with each other. A couple of things to, again, just note here. One is that I'm representing two. So I'm going to share my experience as well. Again, not through the filter of my story about me and my heart, right? But just what's going on right now. Yeah? And stay curious. So, Kathy, when you're ready, when I'm ready, What do you notice?
I notice wind and a coolness, a breeze, a lightness.
And what happens when you look at me? That's something a facilitator often asks, of the different representative. What is it like to be with this other one? Like to be in the system with the other one? What do you notice when you look at me?
As representative of your heart?
Don't forget about your label.
Okay.
What's your experience when you look at me? Because you're representing my heart right now. It's what's happening.
Okay. I see a distance, a familiarity, a peace.
What was the last word?
Peace.
Peace. Was the first word distance?
Yes.
Interesting. So there's a little like different things going on there. Yeah.
Yeah. Distance, familiarity, peace.
So I noticed early on you smiling at me, which I really enjoyed. There was some relief at feeling like, oh, my heart's having a good time. Yay. That's what I want. And there's something about, I have this shirt. It doesn't usually, but right now I'm going, wow, that's a fun shirt I'm wearing. And I almost feel like I want to, like I'm ready to boogie with you or something, like to get a little silly, to get a little, just to move a little bit. Nothing extravagant, nothing too vulnerable, just, I don't know, I'm ready to have fun with you. And I have the feeling you may be ready to have fun with me. I don't know if that resonates for you.
Yeah, I feel like that really connecting to that just jives me up. I'm just ready to have fun.
Yeah, and not be serious.
No, no, no.
I mean, we can do serious another time, but somehow right
Yeah.
now, yeah.
No, it's nice.
It is nice. And I have my insight, so I'm going to release you from the role. Thank you very much, Kathy. You can go back to being Kathy. I'm going to remove the spotlights. Okay. So, that was my experience with my heart. Okay. It's your heart after all. So it could be comfy and cozy and lovey-dovey. It's your heart after all. There could be grief or confusion. There can be all kinds of things. And I invite you to not take it too personally or again, filter it too much with what you think is already going on with your heart, but just let yourself have your experience and let the other one have their experience and go, huh, that's interesting. I had kind of a serious day, so I wasn't expecting that much fun with my heart. That wasn't like, oh, this is nice. So allow to have whatever shows up, show up, and then be curious about it. Okay. You're going to get 10 minutes, 1 minute for padding. And please, and I will try to remember to send you a reminder, but at the 5-minute point, you could do this constellation forever. Bring it to a close and have the second person go so you both get your time. That's really important. Very frequently, the person who's representing the heart first will say, oh, we can keep on going. And then you get cut off in the middle of yours. So each of you take your turns, okay? So who here would prefer not to do this? And this always takes me a couple minutes. I'm going to assume the people who have their videos off are not going to do this because you do need to have your video on to do this, okay? So Judy and Gina and Ashley, if you want to participate, please turn your video on and let me know that you would like to do that. There we go. We got Judy. Excellent. And Gina and Ashley. Okay. And maybe we're getting Gina as well, she's in a dark place. I think Gina's in a dark place. It is important. There we go. Excellent. And Ashley's coming in. Perfect. Anyone who would prefer not to be put in a pair, let me know.
Can I ask a question?
Please, Suzanne.
Oh, I don't want to, I don't know exactly how to do this. So I don't want someone to get stuck with someone who doesn't know how to do this. Or have them be stuck with me. So I just believe that kind of up to, everybody's smiling. That makes me feel good. So
Suzanne, everybody can do this. Yeah, everybody can do this. It's just sharing what your experience is. This is the beautiful thing about it. Yeah, yeah. How many people here is this your first time or sort of your first time or still early days? Yeah, yeah. I mean, Kathy, it was a little new. There's some newness going on here, right? So don't worry about that. Okay. And if you feel more comfortable having the constellation done for you first, then you can ask for that. You can ask your partner for that. Yeah. And again, if anyone doesn't want to do it, you don't need to do it. I'm not requiring anybody to do it. I just think it'll be fun for most of you. Anyone else who anyone prefer not to do it? Okay, give me a second. There could be a group of 3, in which case I will give you an extra minute or 2, but I am going to ask you to watch time and make sure that all 3 of you get a chance, okay? Yeah, there's one group of 3, so I'm going to give you 13 minutes, okay? So those of you in the room of 3, just please make sure you divvy up the time fairly for the 3 of you. There you go. Call me if you need any help. So you need to accept the invitation. There we go. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Well done, well done. We're going to do another dyad, but let's just take a moment and hear 1 or 2 or 3 brief shares. Hope you had a terrific time, but if you had a tricky time, that you can share that too. A couple of brief shares or questions. Mia.
Yeah, big shout out to my group. We were the 3, and we found time for everyone to have an experience. And I'm always grateful for this practice because all the stories and all the thoughts that live in my head, and then just having a place to like it's outside, you know. Yeah, that was my experience. Like I talking to my heart, it's like, oh, that wasn't the if that makes any sense. I'm having a hard time articulating right now, but
Yeah.
getting stuck in that story and then actually being able to kind of, in a way, have a conversation.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's worthwhile stopping and checking in with us in our heart, or us in our business, or us in our work, or these things in our lives that we just take for granted. And then we go, oh, wow, my heart is so tired. Oh. And then we can, again, it's elephant in the room business. We're actually dealing with what's true. Yeah. So I'm glad you had that experience, Mia. Thank you very much. Somebody else. One more share about you and your heart. Leslie W. Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed both of our hearts, and how the energy moved to different parts of our bodies, and how how we shifted, and how our hearts gave us very sweet, simple, easy messages. It's very sweet.
Nice. Nice. There's also just something here, under the best of circumstances, that constellations can give us a mirror. We feel seen. Yeah. You know, if we have this interaction with our heart and it feels true, and tender or whatever, how often in a day do we actually go through not really feeling seen? Yeah, so it's a nice thing to have our truth or ourselves mirrored for a little bit. Yeah. This is why we need to stay present to the information rather than do something that will be nice for the client, right? We don't want to do that. It's well-intentioned, but it won't feel true. It won't feel true. Yeah. One more share before we launch into the next little exercise. Yeah, Elka.
Went on mute, turned off my video. So I was doing the constellation and my heart was expressing its sensations or its noticings to me. And while that was happening, my computer said, my battery is going to die. You better plug me in. And that was the feedback in the field.
Yeah.
When that the articulation that was being made by the heart, you know, was there, but it was when I said that all connected. When I articulated what happened with the computer, it's like, oh, my heart was not finding it was out of batteries. So I got the feedback from my computer in the field, not just my representative.
Yeah. Francesca Mason-Borain, for those of you who don't know her, she's a rather famous elder in the field here in the United States. She has a phrase which is, the field is efficient. It uses everything. Now, we have to be a little careful about this because I always like saying also, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. Once we get into interpreting everything, we'll lose our minds, right? But very frequently there'll be this one thing that will show up and you'll go, oh, yeah. Like you're in a workshop room with a bunch of people and then a stranger walks into the room at just the right moment. And you're like, that was relevant. That was relevant. Yeah. So yeah, thank you for that, Elka. Tech often does that. And then sometimes tech is just tech. But you can feel it. You can feel the difference between something that feels not so relevant and something that feels like it belongs, or it's helping us understand something. It's information. Okay, ready to do one more, my friends? I am going to mix the groups up anew just so that the same 3 people don't have to be in a group of 3, just so that that can be, unless, and that might change if someone decides they don't want to do this. But it's going to be me and my ancestors. Now, this is kind of a bonkers thing to do. Like, are all your ancestors going to show up in some weird schizophrenic mishmash? No, that's not what's going to happen. This is a learning that's very important as a facilitator. The meaning of my ancestors will show up that's relevant to who and what you need right now. Yeah. It may show up as a particular person. It may show up as just, you know, love or grief or whatever. Yeah. And so don't try too hard to make it fit into a category. Just receive whatever's coming through my ancestors. Okay. Now, if you're like, if you want to break the rules, there's always people who want to break the rules. Like, can I have a specific ancestor? Yes, you can do whatever you want. But I do invite you to try this. What is the meaning or the emotional transmission from my ancestors now for you? Okay. And how do I react to that? Remember, you're representative too. Does that feel great? Does that feel scary? Is it confusing? Notice how it lands in you in your body. Yeah. Okay. So is there anyone here who would prefer not to do this? Let me know. Gina and Ashley, turn on your videos if you would like to participate, please. I think you do, but I want to make sure. Is there anybody who would prefer not to? Let me know. Okay. Give me a second. I'm just going to make sure none of the original 3 are in the group of 3. Okay. And some of you, just by the luck of the draw, might end up with the same people, but I just wanted to make sure that the group of 3 wasn't the group of 3 again, okay? So again, you've got 13 minutes. I will give you a heads up about rotating, and the group of 3, pay attention to the time, make sure everyone gets a turn, okay? See you in a few minutes. Hi, Gina, did you drop out? Do I need to get you back into a group with who? With
Yes, please. Sorry.
Suzanne. Okay, let me. I just sent you the invitation. Can you see that and accept that? There you go. Here they come. Okay, welcome back, everybody. So I do want to spend just a moment or two talking about the training and answering questions about it. But before I do that, one or two shares. What happened with you and your ancestors? Briefly, let's hear from a couple of you. Yeah, Judy.
I was in the trio this time with Susie and Cheryl. Thank you both. And I just I'm raising my hand because there was one sentence that I wanted to complete before the Zoom closed, which is to Susie. It is amazing to see the embodiment of both lineages qualities represented in you. And then now to the group, Leslie, I think that from my experience, it was wonderful to experience how in both of those representations for both constellations, that the Ancestor 1 and Ancestor 2 were able to really gel and align, and it felt like family in a very good way.
Oh,
And,
good.
yes. So thank
Awesome.
you.
Yay. Thank you. So does that mean you took advantage of the 3 and you had 2 representatives for the, oh, you went for it. Good for you. Breaking the rules. Yay. Excellent. Perfect. That's really nice. Yeah. Somebody else. I love being, oh, we got 3 people. Let's take advantage of this. That's great. Yeah. Another quick share.
I just was going to say, I don't think it was intentional. It just kind of emerged that way. And it just happened automatically. So I just would like to add that to what
Awesome.
Judy.
Awesome, but you cooperated with the movement, which is another thing that facilitators need to do. And it's not always easy because sometimes something shows up like it's not what we want to give our attention to. And other times it arises and it is what we want to give our attention to. So they can be really tricky, right? But you guys you went with what arose. That's great. It was Suzanne or someone had your hand up for a second, or did she disappear?
It was me.
There you are.
So it was really interesting because, as you know, I was hesitant to do this again because I just feel like I'm, floundering. I'm not really getting it like I think other people are already very familiar. So let's just say that. So I was in the room by myself for about 6 or 7 minutes. And so I went about thinking, well, that's what's supposed to happen. I was being very hesitant about it. So it was like, okay, so somebody heard me. And then I came back halfway through and then Gina comes in the room, my partner. And we had a really lovely representation about ancestors. And but it was in a very different way, but it felt right the way it happened.
Yeah. This is really something, Suzanne. This is actually a pretty big deal for facilitators or just participants in general. to receive whatever's happening as information. Yeah. This, we can't do this all the time in the life. We understandably protest things that happen, right? But the more, even in our lives, the more we can, we have a traffic jam show up when we're on the way to the urgent appointment, and we can go, okay, this is what's happening now. Yeah, it's an enormous gift, right? And it is very necessary for that facilitating thing, because it's all an invitation from the field to just see something. Yeah. And the elephant in the room. So congrats, Suzanne. That's really a big deal. Thank you for sharing it. Okay, everybody. So you're all going to be leaving pretty soon. So I just want to say a few words, even for those of you who may not be considering the training. I want to put a little information in the chat for you. There are dates and the link. You can click on it now, or you can copy and paste, however you want to do that. There are a couple of incentives if you're considering it, or you have a friend around, getting on board. What it really does mean, if you really haven't given this serious attention yet, now's the time to look at the website, really dig in, look at the details, and reach out to me. Yeah, it's a big commitment, and it's not something you can kind of sign on to casually. So now's the time to take a look at that. And then I also just want to throw this in here for all of you, even if you're not looking for a training. I do online constellations every 2 to 3 weeks, online group constellations. We have an exercise for everybody, and then we do one constellation for a focused client who has signed up for that ahead of time. You are all welcome. It's just $10 to come and witness and represent. There's a bunch of people here who do it. Jacqueline's one of my regulars. There's a bunch of folks who do it all the time, and you're welcome to come. You get healing just being in the presence of a family system coming into order. Yeah. And so there's benefits even beyond the, wow, it's kind of cool. I like showing up for this kind of incentive to go to Constellations. If you've ever been invited to a holiday dinner by a friend whose family you didn't know at all, and you got there and they were really a healthy family who cared for each other really nicely, and you went home feeling really good, yeah, that's what this is like. Being exposed to healthy systems, or systems that start out disordered and become ordered, it's really good for us to be around. So that's your incentive. Or if you're new to this and you're wanting to check it out, the best way to experience is just go to Constellations. They're very available online now, but maybe you find something local as well. So at this point, we just got a few minutes. Any questions either about the training or about Constellations, or something you want to share in these last few minutes? Want to invite you to any questions or comments. Yeah, Jacqueline. You're muted, Jacqueline.
This is a question that was left over from the previous question time. When intuition was brought into it, and it was so clarifying for me to say, to hear you say, well, we really need to learn the foundations, because I'm very intuitive and trust my intuition. And I really would love to facilitate constellations. And I say I can't because I have to really trust my brain. And I don't trust my brain like I trust my heart and intuition. So I would love it. Would you say one more bit about where intuition comes in there?
Yeah, well, I will just say it's both a brain and a heart thing. You do need your brain. It needs to come along for the ride. But your heart as well, of course. The brain often shows up the most when you're doing a client interview and you're finding out about the history, and you're staying connected to that over the course of the constellation. Yeah. So you're not just a tabula rasa stepping in the field as if you didn't know anything at all, right? And that helps inform what's showing up. So brain and heart. both together. I often say something a little outrageous to my students. I'm not sure I believe in intuition. I think I believe in unconscious knowing, or what we often call muscle memory. Yeah. It's not intuition that makes you drive. It's that you've driven so much, you don't need to think about it much. Yeah. If you're sitting with a friend, a good friend, you know the friend really well, and you're supposed to have coffee and it's very casual, and you're saying to yourself, something's off here. Something is off. I don't know what it is. And then you'll start making stories like, I wonder if I did something wrong. This is where I go, right? A lot of us go, did I do something wrong, right? Did I screw up with my friend? And you start to sweat it. And then it takes about 30 minutes in, and she says to you, Jacqueline, I have something hard to tell you, which is that I just got a really bad biopsy and I don't know how to tell the kids. Yeah. All of our sensing went into noticing that something was off, something was not normal. Yeah. And we label this with intuition, but we're actually pretty complex social creatures who are taking cues from around ourselves all the time. In Constellations, what we're trying to do is turn up the gain on a lot of this stuff. Right? Well, the way I often put it to people is to notice what we're noticing. The stuff we don't tend to notice, we're noticing. Huh, she said that and I got sad. That's very interesting. Right? That kind of thing. So facilitation is something that I think not anybody can do. I think that's ridiculous, but most people can do, particularly if they figure out where their strengths are and what their jam is. You know, is it one-on-one work? Is it group work? Is it in the context of coaching? You know, is there a particular context that works best for somebody? It's hugely adaptable, and you can find the way that works with your strengths. I'm a big believer, do what strengthens you as a facilitator. And then beyond that, it's learning and the person deciding for themselves whether they can do it or not. Yeah, it's up to them.
Thank you. That was fabulous. I'm a big noticer, so I trust my noticing.
There we go. Yeah, this is happening. Yeah, yeah. Another question or share. Aurora, I see you just showed up. You are welcome, but we're about to close out. You might have gotten the time conversion wrong. Any other questions or comments or shares as we're hitting the end of the time here? I want to thank you all for being here. Please take a moment before we sign off. This is a practice I do at the end of every constellation and workshop and training at the end of a day. Take a moment. We've been together 2 hours. I did some talking. Yeah, we did an opening meditation. You did the heart thing. You did the ancestors thing. Close your eyes and just connect with your heart and notice one image or aha or gift or question that arises that is your gift for you, your takeaway for these 2 hours. Let something come up to your heart. When you feel like you have that, I invite you to turn that into a sentence. And then no particular order, popcorn style, lean forward, unmute, share your sentence, and then we'll say goodbye.
I dance with life.
I don't have to do anything.
Keep it as simple as possible.
I receive the gift of deep roots of my ancestors.
Connecting to my heart and my dad and these people here gives me great joy.
Don't get so busy surviving that you forget to notice.
My connection from above is as so below.
My ancestors are waiting for me.
You are expansive.
Elko, you go ahead, and then the next person who is speaking.
Life lives.
You are expansive.
All is okay.
Anybody else? Again, Aurora, glad you made it at the last minute. We'll send out the recording. Yeah. So what I like to do now is everyone unmute and say goodbye. Let's have our messy goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you, Leslie.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.